Welcome to Horticulture, where a group of extension professionals and plant people talk about the business, production, and joy of planting seeds and helping them grow. Join us as we explore the culture of horticulture. Okay, first question. Has anybody had their fall cider yet? Because I've realized I have been lacking in that department.
No, I've had fall apple butter made homemade by a lovely neighbor that brought that over, but not a cider.
I had some at our horticulture agent training at the beginning of September, and it was delicious.
Jelly. I need to go get
But
some
I
of
got
that.
Cold cider because it's still pretty hot outside.
Yeah,
It was at the time.
It's cooled off a great deal in Kentucky here lately, so it's I see the cider consumption going way up.
The bell curve of cider consumption.
Yes.
They're going from like cold to warm, right?
I had peach nectar earlier this year for the first time.
Ooh.
Or I don't know why I said for the first time because it wasn't, but
I was saying,
first time this year.
The peach bandit, like
what?
You love peaches, am I right?
I'm not a bandit. I pay for
you
it. I
have
mean,
to-
eat them in large
Well,
volumes.
Oh my
I'm not a
gosh.
criminal.
I'm not a
The
criminal.
peach thief.
Do you buy them
Just
in
go
bulk,
straight to the
Brett?
matter.
Annie might consider you the
I
peach
do. Oh,
bandit.
this might predate Jessica joining the pod.
Yeah. Do you buy them in bulk? Because my father-in-law visits North Carolina quite often, and he will bring them to us in bulk. So I will suddenly, just like, I get bulk pumpkins this time of year, during the summer, I will get bulk amounts of peaches, and it is wonderful. And I made peach preserves for the first time this summer. And where have I been my entire life? That's the best
What am I
stuff.
doing with my time all of these years?
It's just a canned peach pie, basically, that you put on toast, and it's amazing.
Well,
Fun
I
fact,
don't
I'm
buy them
putting
in
that
like
aside.
in bulk for farmers. Like farmers have a different kind of definition of what bulk is, but for like the
Yes.
normal American consumer, earlier in the year I opened one of the podcasts by asking how many peaches is too many peaches to eat like in one go.
And
And
most of us were
I
horrified.
got some judgmental looks,
Oh.
because I've eaten. I can go pretty hard on some peaches sometimes, and
Some eggs
apparently
as
I'm the
well. I
peach
recently
bandit as a
learned.
result. What do you say?
Some eggs as well, as I recently learned.
Oh man, we don't have to tell stories out
Hopefully.
of
How many eggs do
out
you
of
eat?
context and conversation.
what's that?
Wait, let me just. I'll ask.
I need to know now.
In a sitting, how many
Oh,
eggs do you
gosh.
think you could eat without getting sick?
Would like
eat.
to.
Not would like to.
Prepared however you want.
Yeah.
Deviled eggs, the
However
game
you want.
changes.
See,
the game
that's
changes.
exactly what I said.
What?
right
That
after
doesn't
this.
make any sense to
Deviled
me.
eggs?
But
Hey,
I
Brett,
mean, that's
it's
fine.
like
You can.
wetting the hot dog bun during the competition and eating it. Once you make the egg into a deviled egg, it is much more palatable.
So each half would only count as a half. So if you
Right.
ate two deviled eggs, that'd be one.
That's only one egg. Yeah.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
True.
I'm saying 20 full eggs, so like 40
Oh,
deviled
my
eggs.
You can
gosh.
eat
What are
40
you,
deviled
an
eggs.
anaconda?
I mean,
This is moving into
don't
what I
know.
would consider a reasonable possibility.
We
Sometimes people are like, I don't know, six eggs would be. My tummy would. It'd be very funny if you
I
said
think-
6 now, Jessica. But my
Well,
tummy gets too
scrambled
full
eggs.
after 6. What?
right? Scrambled eggs. I'm trying to
Scrambled?
think. Like we scramble like at least 6 or more every morning.
Oh, yeah.
And
Per person?
not per person, but for like
You sound
me and
defeated.
2 small children, and I think I'm eating most of them.
See, now this is why Jessica is a perfect addition
she's
to the
here.
pod
This is
because
why
she
you
brought
invited me.
reasonable opinions to the podcast for the first time ever.
All
the
the other
first
stuff
time.
didn't matter. This is my consumption of eggs.
I just had a good feeling, and it's all, she happens to be a experienced farmer and horticulture agent, or whatever.
well, eggs. How many
Eggs.
eggs?
Well, because that was how this whole thing started, was that people, I don't find eggs to be filling in any particular way. Like a couple of eggs, I don't find to be particularly filling. And so I'm not saying that I would eat eggs until I was full. I'm just saying I think that there's a higher upper limit than most people would believe. And so Jessica, do you have an answer for how many you think you could eat?
I think I could probably eat like at least 6 or so, because now where I scramble so many all the time, if I do I'll just make an egg
It's not enough.
or 2, I'm like, this is nothing.
Yeah.
But the game
Then I gotta
seems
gotta
to
load 'em with
change for
cheese.
people. If we're talking about a hard boiled egg, for some reason that's different in my mind. If I ate 20 hard boiled eggs, I mean, it seems different than 20 scrambled eggs or 20
See, yeah, I
deviled
feel like
eggs.
scrambled is like everybody's like downfall. Like scrambled is where people are like, I can eat 3, but if you fry it, they're like, I can eat 12. So what is it
What are
about
we talking
scrambling?
about? I find everything all that to be the opposite. Like
I would think you eat more scrambled.
You
Really?
scramble it compacts everything. It brings it all into a smaller package.
Yeah.
Also, I would just like to point out to the audience, I've been made aware that some people have a bit of an ick when it comes to eggs, and sometimes Alexis is the one who brought this up, not me.
It was me.
So wait. So you're saying you eat the better part of maybe 4 to 6 eggs each day or some days, yet you're giving your max number is 6?
Sounds like
Oh
more
no,
like an
I
average.
probably that's maybe the average.
Average. That means you can do far better.
I bet Jessica could put away a dozen eggs.
I
I'm
bet
just
I
kidding.
could.
She's like, you know what? You're right.
You're right.
Cheese. I'm in.
Cheese, salt, pepper, maybe some garlic powder on them.
I'm in.
Yeah,
I'm good.
yeah. You got to mix it up.
I mean, my chickens are giving me like 18 eggs a day right now,
So
so y'all
you
are
have
gonna
to
get
make
eggs soon if
every
I saw
day?
you more often. Yeah, so we gotta eat eggs every day.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I feel like I eat
yeah.
a lot if it's in quiche form. Like I can eat. I
Yeah,
put a
then you're
dozen
eating
eggs.
you're
in
eating a dozen
quiche.
eggs.
Yeah, I'm like,
Yeah, an egg loaf.
an egg loaf, a loaf of eggs. But you know what? We're not talking about egg loaves today, but we're talking about loaves of soil in a sense.
What?
Loaves.
Well, chickens can tie into like
Yeah.
Well, I
organic
was
matter,
That's true.
right?
That's
A
true.
loaf of
That's where I
something
thought we were going.
it has air pockets in it. Has a
Loaf?
lot of ingredients. It often has an active like bio, thing, and has like a yeast, right?
Like
It has
swirl, if you
some
looked at it under the microscope, may look like scrambled eggs, Jessica. There you
Oh,
go. With
wow.
the soil conglomerates
There you
and
go.
structures.
That's a
I
great
was
point,
going
Ray.
with
Bring it
loaf.
in. And whereas
Lots of different
pure clay would
pieces.
look like a boiled egg.
I was
Let's be
just gonna
serious.
tie chickens in with all our organic matter with it. So
We're
We,
all
we
a
can
little
lead.
struggling with
You've already led right in with that. What do you do with your chickens? Are they confined, Jessica? Because this is a soul related question.
yes, they
Okay.
are
Yeah.
slightly confined because we have lots of predators, lots of
Yeah.
hawks and foxes.
You
But
do actually have like chicken litter to kind
I
of
do
move
have
out.
chicken litter,
Yeah.
yeah.
So do you use that in your? I know that you guys are have a bigger operation, but like, do you use that in like a home garden area or anything? Your chicken litter?
Yeah, we've not so much on our main garden area, but some smaller areas I've spread it out in some of our pasture and fields that we have around the barn area, to let it do its thing.
Yeah. Good
break
stuff.
down.
Mhm.
Well,
Breakdown.
I was listening to you. I want to shout out a podcast that inspired me to force these people into talking about organic matter with you today. But it's a little bit older. It's from 2017, but it's really good. It's only 4 episodes, but 4 really great episodes, and they're pretty short. So if you're interested in it, we'll put a link in the show notes. But it's called Priming for Production: Exploring Soil Health, and it's specifically focused on organic matter. So it's Natalie Lounsbury, and that sounds like was funded from a SARE project. So that's pretty exciting to know that they are funded and are excited about organic matter. And so I
loved her in Murder, She Wrote.
And Murder, She Wrote. I wondered why that name sounded familiar. Not
Oh, different.
No relation.
Different
Angela
one.
Lansbury.
No relation.
Took a turn.
But one thing that like really like caught me as a reminder, like as a person who considers themselves a soil nerd, I feel like I know a pretty good amount about organic matter. But the way she sort of put this was, organic matter allows you to produce crops at a lower cost, and that's just like the way it is to it. And because it has these water holding capacities, it has these nutrient capacities, it has a lot of those things, and can supply those to our crops that we would, if it wasn't for organic matter, we would be putting in, whether that's organic fertilizers, conventional fertilizers, drip irrigation, whatever it is, it'd be something, it's an input that we're putting in that way. And so organic matter has a way of providing that naturally to our crops, and that so that we don't have to do it. And it was just sort of like a well duh moment, but just sort of the way it was framed, because I think a lot of the time we think of it as health, and we don't think of it as like the cost of production as often, or at least I don't. But having good organic matter costs you less money is sort of like what it came down to.
It's like a long-term investment, and it's
Mhm.
pretty amazing when you look at it under a lens of like nutrient cycling. And I know that a lot of the books cover that, and the macronutrients, N, P, and K, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and how it modifies each one of those things, and how organic material that it starts with and is broken down by microbes and becomes inorganic, like ammonia and nitrate. I mean, it's pretty amazing what organic matter, when you do a deep dive into that, what it actually does. But before we get too far into this, very quickly, what's a good definition? I've seen a couple different variations of definitions. Do you guys have a favorite definition of soil organic matter?
I don't have a favorite. I've learned too many things.
If not, I looked up one and I
Man,
circled it. I'm surprised.
I'll very briefly interject that if there's not someone out there who, I'm sure there is, that has an organic focused, soil health focused podcast and they don't have it called Organic Matters, then they need.
Oh, that's good.
Nice. You just gave away our next show, Brett. Thanks.
Oh,
Organic
on our
Matters.
next show.
Man, that is so. Look, somebody needs to look that up. If that's not a podcast, I mean, it needs to be. That would be pretty amazing.
Well, as the person who derailed us and the most non-legit plant person on here, I think of like organic matter, something like carbon comes to mind as something
lots
related.
of research being done on that, on organic matter and soil sequestration.
Did you know organic matter is half carbon? Like 50% is just straight up carbon. That's how they actually measure your organic matter. Like when you go get a soil test done at your local extension office and they tell you have 3% organic matter, it means you have 6% carbon in your soil. Like
that's cool.
1.5.
Yeah, I guess the good point there is that, if you're interested in organic matter, it can be measured, and that's one of the tests that is still offered there at the university. So if you would like to know, if you have interest after the podcast, kind of approach your local county extension office, and they can help you out with that.
Well, I think another thing that I think about too, and I'm just trying to get my contribution in here early, so then I could just listen afterward, but we talked about on a previous episode about compost and the idea of this like relationship between nitrogen and carbon, green sources and brown sources. And I see a connection there, or like a similarity of processes where things like carbon and nitrogen cycling that happen within systems. And it's one of those reasons why like heavy tillage is something that is not necessarily encouraged in some cases, and it can actually destroy some of that carbon, and the carbon then off gases is carbon monoxide and dioxide, and it's all coming back to me now.
I know,
but I think to me that concept of this balance between nitrogen and carbon and the sources of those things of the carbon and nitrogen too in the soil, so things like cover crops or other, I'm not to spoil what we're going to talk about later, I guess, but that to me is like a nice entry point for at least imagining, like, if I need brown matter in my compost pile, what am I going to add? Well, that's carbon, and that's part of our organic matter building. And if I need nitrogen, what am I going to add? And that's part of the same, a similar kind of process that's maybe more familiar to more people.
I would, and that's one of the things you have to be kind of not careful about. But I was going to talk a little bit about this towards the end of the show. I mean, home gardeners, this affects more than commercial operations, obviously. But if you take a heavy carbon load and put it in the soil, it can bind through several chemical processes. It can bind nitrogen for a time until that's broken down and equalized out. So it's not uncommon in like landscapes and home gardens that you're going to just put a heavy carbon load onto soil. Keep in mind that it can cause some nutrient deficiency through nitrogen deficiency.
That's a good
for a time.
Good point, right? Because we see that a lot from the side of things as an agent with especially like raised beds when people are trying to amend them and add that matter, and then their plants often are struggling from that nitrogen deficiency. So needing to add a little something extra in there for those plants during that time.
Yeah, I would say like organic matter is those chemical processes for sure, Brett, that you like kind of brought up that we don't always think about as like, chemical, but carbon, nitrogen, those are chemicals, but organic matter is also like the physical and the microbiology in there. So physical, organic matter is 50% pore space. And so that's, that would be ideal. So it's pore space with macro and micro pores. So it's air and water holding capacity, ways for that water to actually percolate down through the soil and not just shed off it, but, supplies that kind of that sponge. A lot of the time we think of organic matter as like a sponge that kind of sits on, on top of your topsoil and, your upper horizons. And then you've got your microbes that are completing those chemical processes for you. And they're the ones that are eating up that carbon, but also eating up the glucose that's leaving the plant roots and creating things that those plants can then use. And they're respiring and making that ammonia and all of those good nutrients that we want. And so it's sort of this, microbes, chemicals, physical properties that sort of make up organic matter. Fun fact.
Is this related to the soil food web?
Yeah. It actually it is. All those microbes down in there.
Cool. End of
And
question.
photosynthesis.
No, I'm just kidding.
Done.
Yes, answer is
Because
yes.
and again, I'm just sort of, this is all my secondhand stuff that I've picked up from just being around. That like it kind of is both the things eating and what they're eating kind of make up, and that there's like the soil food web thing is like the idea of like almost like a food chain where the grasshopper eats the grass, the snake eats the grasshopper, the bird eats the snake, the whatever, like that kind of. But it's also the grass in that case, or it's the thing. The carbon's tied up inside those biological components, but it's also some of the actual like more elemental aspects.
And not static at all, because when we talk about organic matter in soil, we're talking about plant and animal material that's in some stage of decomposition, talking about the microorganisms and their byproducts. And what you were just kind of referring to, I think there, Brett, was the byproducts, which is all the good things through mineralization that we see. That's the proteins, amino acids that are becoming the all important ammonia and nitrate that's usable by plants. But that's organic matter in a nutshell is just plant and animal material in some form of decay, along with the critters, the microorganisms that sort of live with them. So that's kind of the basis of the discussion today. But it's not static at all, and the levels are always fluctuating. One of you mentioned earlier about the fact of over tillage. It was a big concept, which, by the way, started in Kentucky. Really cool. No till started right here in Kentucky. I'll claim that. Started here many years ago. And became popular all across the country and the world. But
correct me if I'm wrong. I believe the longest continuous no-till patch of ground in the United States is out at Spindletop Research Farm in Kentucky.
Did not
I
know
believe
that.
so.
I mean, I know
I
some of
think
the
I've heard
very
that
early research, like the beginning of the research started there. So that makes perfect sense.
Now, when you go to see it, it looks just like this little area of a cornfield. Like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
It's kind of anticlimactic, but it is a cool.
It's like absolutely epic in the grand scheme of
Totally.
agriculture,
Conceptually,
modern agriculture.
very, yeah.
It's absolutely amazing. Yeah, I didn't realize that. That's so cool. But it kind of all started here. But when you guys mentioned that if you overtill, you're actually causing a degradation of the organic matter too quickly. It does both good and bad things and releases, macronutrients, that NP and K we're talking about, too quickly. But all of that kind of spawned out of this no-till movement and the stability that no-till brings. Not only stability of the top of the soil itself physically, but the stability in the nutrients within the soil and the moisture and all the other good things that come along with no-till. But started right here in Kentucky. Very cool. Very cool.
What you're saying like makes me think about something I heard that was to reap the full benefits of organic matter and all the different ways that it's great. We have to both consume it and replenish it. And I say we in like the general sense, mostly like the microbes, but
that cycle,
the plants. And so we can't just be replenishing it, via cover crops and stuff like that. We have to be we have to have those microbes consuming it. Otherwise that stuff's just like sitting and not being
Mhm.
If you're taking off too
degraded.
much of the organic, the bulk organic matter, like let's say
Right.
crop residue, then you're not feeding the
Right.
microorganisms. And all of a sudden, if you have crop residue and no microorganisms, you have no
Way to
breakdown process.
no way to
Yeah,
Right.
break it
yeah,
down.
Right.
yep.
So
That's
like
exactly
that's why
right.
like I know a lot of people who, I don't want to say I know a lot of people, but there are people who, especially in like strawberry production and some like tunnel production, who will like biofumigate, and what that does to that, top inches of soil of your microbes. And so yes, they're getting rid of the bad microbes, but just like when humans take an antibiotic, right, they're also getting rid of their good microbes, and how that can really throw things for a short time into like a weird limbo where nothing might be degrading for a short amount of time because there's nothing there to break it down. Uh, so I thought that was pretty interesting. We have to consume it and replenish it in order for that to be working. And like no-till is, we obviously know that no-till is a great thing, but it's not. I think people, my opinion, this is strictly my opinion.
Hot take inbound.
Hot take. My opinion is that like a lot of people put a lot of pressure on this kind of no-till, where all you're doing is sort of piling up onto the soil surface. And yes, that can be good, but there's something for every situation. And I think the idea of like low till is not always a bad thing. And I don't want
Mhm.
people to think that tillage is
No,
always
no,
bad, because
no.
what light tillage, whether it's that you're just maybe occasionally taking a ripper through, which is just like a single tine that you're just dragging through one area to kind of make sure that things are getting broken up. If you're having some water, moving problems or something, like your pore space just isn't right, you can be doing that. And what that does is breaks up those aggregates just a little bit to make them accessible to the microbes. So like instead of them having to climb Mount Everest to get to that, they're, maybe just like walking over the hill type of situation. And so a little bit of tillage is not always bad. Like excessive tillage, yes, is a problem, but it's a problem to me from more of the erratic weather situation that we have, because
Mhm.
we can supplement, a field that has no organic matter can still outcompete a field if you just have to put in more inputs, right? That's where excessive fertilizer, excessive water, those types of things would come in. It can still outcompete a no-till field. You're just putting a lot more, you're spending a lot more to get it there, right? But when you have 4 inches of rain that suddenly come, as we are seeing, all around the US, and this random things, or we're having a lot more droughts followed up by 4 inches of rain, that's where I think organic matter can be the most valuable, is in a lot of the time in its physical properties.
Physical stability is what you're
Mhm.
saying, like protective cover, or just a modification of the soil structure itself, not just a
Yeah,
physical covering.
right.
So there's so many benefits to organic matter. I think that, that's widely known, well accepted, no argument there. There is some limited scenarios where you have to be careful with home gardeners getting, too much of an influx of organic matter in very limited situations. But organic matter is
Well,
a good
but
thing.
organic, is it too much organic matter, or is it too much carbon? Because
The balance of the organic matter, yeah.
I don't, I think that there's, how do remember, organic matter is only 50% carbon, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the idea here. And I'm saying this because like this is something that like shocked me today, and was like a reminder that like we often think about it as you can overdo organic matter, but like technically we probably could never reach the peak organic matter, like in
Yeah, on
nature.
especially larger areas,
And
right? Yeah.
well, but we can reach max carbon, which
Yeah.
means like what we were talking about, like mulch can be really hard to break down, right? It ties up nitrogen. Jessica said that earlier. So
Yeah.
yes, we can overdo the carbon for short amounts of period, but true organic matter, I don't know if it can ever reach fully saturated, because you've got those microbes breaking it down and respiring. So like I don't know if even if in you were raised beds, let's just say in a non-sterile environment, if you could ever reach that capacity. I don't know. The podcast I was listening to shout out to them. They were talking about this exact thing, and they were saying like there are different saturation points for different types of soil, right? Like sandy soil versus clay, loams, all those kinds of things, but that like they could never see true saturation ever actually being possible of what is actually organic matter. And I thought that was fascinating.
And as long as the system's working right, it's, we talked about,
Right,
the
the system
plant
has
and
to be
animal
working.
material
Exactly.
itself, the ratios therein. We've talked about the microbes, and we've talked about, that there's processes where the inorganic, compounds or organic compounds are broken down to inorganic compounds. The good guys that are, palatable for plants. And somebody want to summarize like all of the things we've been talking about. And what I want to move on to is all the benefits we've just talked about, and go into some of the common ways, which we've already kind of dipped into that. Some of the common ways, we'll start with home gardeners, but also, commercial operations can increase organic matter levels. So on the benefit side, the big benefits, the big things we think of right off the top of our heads for organic matter, it's, soil protection, one of you guys mentioned
Nutrient, water holding
nutrient.
capacity.
Yes, both of those things very important. So all of those things incredibly important. So a home gardener is listening to this program today, and they're like, "Oh, organic matter is awesome. I hadn't thought a lot about it. I want to increase my organic matter. Where do I start?"
Well, just before we jump into that, I
Yeah,
think
go ahead,
one
Brett.
of the we may have some people who this is brand new to them; they've never heard of this before. We may have some people who, oh yeah, I know about organic matter. I know it's a good thing, and we live in a world where organic products are marketed as more wholesome. So organic sounds good, right? I can get on board with that.
Yeah.
I think one thing just to understand the context out of which this renewed interest in organic matter came is a little bit more of a different in the no-till too. There was this period of time where people were trying to figure out how to grow crops better, and then they through a variety of different discoveries, we were able to synthesize things like nitrogen fertilizer that we weren't able to do before. And so you could
Ammonia
theoretically
nitrate.
add
Yeah.
whatever you wanted to the soil and supplement whatever, and
In
you didn't need to rely
extremely
on.
concentrated forms. Yeah, Brett. That's a great
Yeah,
point. Yeah.
you're freeing you're freeing us from the natural processes of fertility and cycling that had bound us to the soil across many millennia, when people were probably taking care of our soil organic matter in a way without even realizing or calling it that. And so what happened was, and particularly like in the United States, for instance, they went all in on agriculture in a place like the Great Plains, which had large amounts of grass. We would maybe call them cover crops now, that grew up and died or burned, grew up and died and burned. And over time, we'll talk about the practices later, they built up the soil organic matter of that area, making it one of the most fertile and productive places ever to have agriculture endeavored upon it. And so, but what happened was they tilled it and they grew, and they tilled it and they grew, and they tilled it and they grew, to the point where all of that progress was then gone. And so the idea of the soil is just this. Basically, it's like a test tube where we're going to put the plant in the tube, we're going to add the nitrogen, we're going to add the other chemical components, and we're going to grow the plants. That kind of scientific ideology, chemistry, agricultural chemistry ideology that prevailed in the early 20th century, we've gradually realized, oh, wow, that's not the whole story. And so this idea of organic matter, this idea of the soil being a living thing, the reason why Alexis in one of our early podcasts said, if you call it dirt, I'll, come find you, or whatever she said, is that realizing there actually is a lot more complexity here. And over the last 20 to 30 years, it's become more and more accepted that organic matter is an important thing. And it's like, this is the direction we're trying to head with sustainability. But a large part of the reasons for that is because there was really huge environmental catastrophes and farming catastrophes that came out of not respecting organic matter and understanding organic matter and soil health. And so I think, we can and will talk about the dorky things and talk about how to do it in a more pragmatic sense. But like the stakes of the idea of organic matter are actually pretty high in terms of
Oh
like
yeah.
broader agriculture. it relates to the concept of soil health. It relates to us continuing to be able to feed ourselves as a planet. It relates to things like climate resiliency and everything else. And so, like, I just think that it's an important part of the story that I just shoehorned in here for lack of a better place. But as I read more about like soil organic matter, not specifically, but is related to the establishment of key components of the USDA, like the Natural Resource Conservation
Oh
Service,
yeah.
which was
Yeah.
founded in part in response to the Dust Bowl, which is ultimately about a lack of structure in the soil, a lack of and over tillage, and a lack of organic matter. And so, while it is fun to play with the numbers and see your soil test, the actual stakes here are really, really high. So anyway, all that to say, I mentioned the Great Plains cover cropping. Nature was cover cropping the Great Plains long before cover cropping was a cool thing. But so that's one thing I would throw
The
out as a
system was working. Yeah. Yeah.
When in
organic
doubt,
matter.
just copy Mother Nature. She's
And there's
got
a
it unlocked.
reason, Brett, you mentioned, like there's a reason why USDA has major focus areas on organic matter, or why the University of Kentucky labs, which are, just basic university labs, public facing, many of them, but there's a reason why that they cover organic matter in their testing. There's a reason why, because it's that important. That should be an indicator, when you see things like that, how very important that organic matter is. I think a lot of us know it, but day to day, just walking around, we don't think about the in-depth terms that were a
You
little bit more in
don't?
depth.
That's
I
not
mean,
something everybody does. Just like
not in
walk
mixed
around thinking
conversation,
about
because they give you
soil.
weird looks when you talk about that cation exchange. I said I
Never,
wasn't going to mention.
never
Oh,
stopped.
you
They give
mentioned
you
it.
weird
Never
looks.
stopped Alexis.
No, I never stopped her
I have
before. No.
mushrooms on my shirt today. I mean, let's talk about soil.
But I mean, I think that, the idea that you can have the soil be producing, be a part of, like, you're taking care of it, and therefore it's
Mhm,
producing some of the things that you need, so you don't have to add as many inputs, those
mhm.
synthesized fertilizers or animal, manure or whatever. That's a big part of, like, what Alexis was just talking about. Like, there are money saving implications there. It just so happens that chemical fertilizers require a lot of energy to manufacture, so there are sustainability and energy use considerations there. With, can we have this, rather than thinking of it as the test tube, the chemical agricultural chemistry world, where we're adding in inputs, and energy is not as cheap as it used to be, and as abundant as it used to be. And so we're trying to be a little smarter about that.
Mhm.
Taking some of the things like you're asking about, practices, things that we can do to add the organic matter back. It allows the soil processes to offset some of those heavy inputs that were needed before. So, like, I mentioned compost. Is compost a way to increase organic matter?
I think it's one of the common ways that, especially, smaller scale operations, I think that's
Mhm.
what a lot of them, where they start, is
Yeah,
compost.
Jessica, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that, like, I think that's what everyone normally thinks.
Yeah.
Like, I have to use compost, right, to
Mhm.
increase more organic matter. But there's kind of a couple different options you can do. Something as simple as just, like, adding, like, the leaves that you rake, maybe in your backyard garden,
Yeah.
adding those in there in the fall, incorporating them in the spring, and a variety of different things. We kinda mentioned manures and stuff earlier, um,
Yeah, that's
and
a
j
big one. Yeah,
it
manures,
I've
different
always
animal
thought
manures.
of, I don't wanna say always, that's a lie. More recently, based on, like, research, have started to think about compost, and we've talked about this in our compost episode, of compost as a soil conditioner rather than something to build organic matter. So to me, it's like the vitamin you're going to give those microbes so that they can create more soil organic matter for you, not you putting organic matter on there. Does that kind of make sense? Like we used to think, oh, to build, to have organic matter, you have to put it on there, and it was like,
Mhm.
here you go, I'm dropping manure, which is organic matter. But rather, I think we should think about it as it's helping to create organic matter,
Yeah.
because putting on 6 inches of compost is probably less beneficial than an inch of compost with something like a cover crop where you're getting plant roots into the soil system. So like
a green manure cover crop.
yeah, a green manure rather than like a, you know, even a compost. But like Jessica said, like the leaves are also good, and it's something that those microbes can actually like break down. Mulches in general. Jessica has a lot of experience with rehabbing soil with mulch, don't you?
I do, yeah. I've used to live at a house that all the topsoil was gone and it was pure clay and rocks when I went to make all the flower beds, right? Because there was nothing there. And it takes time, right?
Yeah.
So especially if you're working in an area that is like completely clay, right? Or that soil is just so hard to work with. But it's rewarding because in the end, like after a couple of years, and I will say that because everyone always seems to want instant results. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to like, oh, I bought this piece of land and I'm going to start a garden, but it's pure clay. I'm going to put some compost down or I'm going to add some other
That'll
organic
fix everything,
matter.
right?
I'm going to put some old straw or something, you know, down to break down over the winter and I'll be able to plant in this beautiful soil the next year. But it was probably like year 4 for me where I finally had that like, oh my gosh, like,
And you've
look,
been putting down mulch, right?
I'd been putting down mulch, like finely shredded
Yeah.
mulch, not any of the big chunks.
Uh-huh.
And then, you know, adding other things here and there with it. But finally see a major difference in the soil in these flower beds. But it took about like 4 years to finally see that.
Yeah, 4 years. I feel like that was only achievable because you're like really smart and dedicated and knew what you were doing. Because
Thank
5
you.
to 7 is what I would have, you know,
Yeah,
like
they were smaller beds too. So, you know,
now she's and humble on top of
I'm
it all.
humble about it.
They were
And it's
beautiful.
rewarding though, like,
Oh,
you know, when you
no,
finally
totally.
see that change, um, because, you know, I have nothing more I hate when, you know, those companies take all your topsoil off your
Yeah.
property.
It'd be a crime. Well, and I mean, when we think about it, like saying 4 years, even 7 years, in the grand scheme of things, like yeah, that can feel like a really long time when you're really wanting to plant a garden or start cropping or something right now. But like in the grand scheme of things, that's not a long period of time.
Oh,
You
it's
know, like
not.
when you think about how long it takes for soil to make. But again, I'm going back to just sort of some of the research I've been hearing about. You can shorten that timeline, which again is very new and fresh to me, where even 4 years, I mean, there's research that has been done that like 15 months, if you do it right and like are optimizing all these different parts, could be done in like, you know, 2 years, at 15 months to 2 years, but you have to
What is
really
it? What is
yeah,
it
yeah.
that could be done?
So optimizing, so things like having living plant roots consistently in the soil. So whether that's, you know, cover crop or even your crop is also doing that, but mixing that in. So kind of a year-round living root situation, as well as making sure that you are putting, if you need to put down or add in any compost or, you know, other nutrient substances to maximize how those microbes and how quickly they break things down. I mean, that's like perfect situation, right? But the
But
fact that
like, what would be the outcome of that? Like a change of a certain percentage of organic
yeah, that
matter,
your
or
organic matter, so if you the study I was listening to, which is of course just one study I was listening to, and it was in a lab and you know, in a perfect situation, so like you have to take that into consideration. But they fed the microbes like a glucose, sulfur, nitrogen, you know, all of the things that they needed on a weekly basis. And they started from clay that had no microbial population, that was completely sterilized, just like 100% clay, right? Like things you would throw pottery with. And they added in a solution of a mix of microbes directly from you know, a soil system outside. They added that and they fed them exactly what they needed and mimicked the plant roots. They didn't actually have plants, but they mimicked all of those things that plants provide. And in 15 months they went from literally nothing to 1% organic matter, which might not sound like a lot, but when you're going from nothing in a completely sterile situation to in 15 months having 1%, I mean,
yeah,
a
that's
lot of
pretty
our
awesome.
agricultural soils have 1%, like, and we're growing mass amount of crops on them. So like that was pretty cool. And like we'll never be in a situation, truly in a situation in the world, hopefully in my lifetime at least, that we will have like, completely sterile soils. So like what that means is we can build those things quickly if we're optimizing what those microbes are capable of. And I think one of the easiest ways for home gardeners or larger farmers is to have some sort of root system, whether that's your crop, your cash crop, your tomatoes, or winter rye in the soil at all times, would be like one of the easiest ways, and honestly one of the cheaper ways for a lot of people, because compost is expensive, man.
It is expensive.
And like winter wheat, like, or winter rye seed is real cheap in comparison.
And
So
good compost is hard to find,
it
Good
is.
right?
compost
Because
that you know the source of.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's,
Yeah.
that's coming from the agent side and talking to people is like, 1, it's expensive. 2, is it a good source? Has it been
Mhm.
composted properly? Are you just buying something that's full of weed seed that has
Right.
not been composted properly and you're just bringing in stuff? Is it, I know it was an issue a couple years ago, manure being composted in some of these
Mm.
where that
Yeah.
manure is
Persistent
coming from,
chemicals. Yeah.
from like
Fried
herbicides.
old South Farm. Brett, were you on South Farm when that happened?
I can neither confirm nor deny that if
That is the right answer, Brett.
a cow were to eat, or a goat were to eat a plant that had been treated with herbicide, some of those survive the composting process and could theoretically cause leaf curl in an entire bed of tomatoes.
Oh,
Definitively. Yes.
oh, good times, good times.
Because
But
there's certain herbicides that have
persist.
a
They're
pervasiveness through.
biologically
A lot of
persistent.
things that are used, I believe, in, like, horse pastures
Mhm.
Mhm.
that make it through.
Yeah, there's a classification of chemical, and I think most of there was a transition time where there's a big problem in the state, and it was a widespread problem, not only in Kentucky, but other states
Mhm.
where these persistent biochemicals, but it said that clearly on the label, do not use this for this amount of time, do not use it for composting material, but that means that you would have to read the label, and not everybody apparently did that. So you had large operations, animal operations that were selling the composted manure products,
Mhm.
and then causing lots of plants to die. So you have to watch out for that persistent chemicals in compost. And Jessica, you mentioned another big one. If your compost pile doesn't get hot enough, you have to watch for not only weed seeds but diseases. If
Oh,
you've
Mhm.
yeah.
composted disease materials, and all these are things we kind of work through, especially like home gardeners. We work through with them, kind of giving just a little bit of warning to say, if you're new to compost and you want to increase organic matter, that is great, but here's some of the things to watch out for. That's
Mhm.
kind of the three biggies right there. And the one is, if you're composting yourself, that's fine. You know the source you're putting in there. But if you're purchasing compost, Jessica, yeah, you got, and Brett, those of you that were talking about the chemicals, you have to kind of question the farm a little bit. And if
Mhm.
it's a modern composting operation, you hope that they use
Right.
clean compost, sources. So
Yeah. I
So,
think g go ahead.
I was gonna say, so I just wanted, like, we've been talking about things, mostly me, and I keep interrupting everybody, but, so what can, like, as we kinda, like, finish this up, like, what can people do, whether you're small backyard garden or even up to, like, market garden size, what can you do to increase your organic matter if you need
mhm.
to do it? Like, my first step would be to tell people, well, figure out what you're working with. Go get your soil tests, because that's always
Mhm.
Mhm.
what I'm gonna say in every episode about soil ever.
That's where you start with anything, with any garden thing. Have you had your soil tested?
Yeah. So first question.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot more than I
I've
can tell
been
you.
recommending, like, if people wanna like an easy cover crop, right? But
Mhm.
you get that fine line sometimes with some of these market gardens and things of, like, where they need to go ahead and put the cover crop on, but their
Mhm.
production season is still going,
Girl, right
and
here. Same.
yeah, same, same. Still got peppers going.
Yep.
So it's finding that what works for their system,
Mhm.
right? And then again, I know I keep going back to livestock, but that's, like, what I have in my
Mhm.
brain and have, like, we've used, almost like, I would say, aged manure, right?
Mhm.
It's not really composted because we have, like, cattle. Like,
Yeah.
do these people have, access to that as maybe something they wanna put on? And, I guess finding, like you said, after a soil test, what resources do they have? Like, what can they what can they
And,
do?
like, it's not all or nothing, like, if you
It's a
have a
systems
small
approach. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
like,
it's a
it's something I
combo.
have to remind myself, like, yeah, it would be really nice if I could, rip out these plants now and get cover crop down in time,
Yeah.
but, like, I really need these for another 2 weeks, and it might make it too late for me to put cover crop down. One, I say go ahead and try it because I'm always astounded at what and,
Yeah.
like, for the cost of seed, it's not always it's not always that big of a deal. Like, it might be, like, $2 worth of seed
I was
Mhm.
technically too
with
late. I
something.
just sowed some annual rye on, and I was probably 2 weeks past my comfort
Yeah,
point,
I've still
but
not
I
done
was
it.
gone. Yeah, so I mean, I'm just now sowing yesterday my rye and some other grasses,
Yeah.
just because I had the seed there, and it was
Mhm.
few bucks worth of seed. It was cheap. I used crimson clover the year before, so I
Mhm.
got the benefit of that. But I used a really basic cover crop this year, just so that my little garden patch out back did not go through winter bare. That's
Right.
the one that was my one thing I did not want, is it to go through the winter bare.
Yeah.
I
And
did not want
so
that.
but I guess what I was getting at was, even if it's one bed, and so you just kinda add that into your rotation. So, like, can you sacrifice 1 row of peppers? Can you sacrifice 1 and, sometimes the answer is no, and, like, there are ways to still, like, work through that with, like, summer options and, like, intercropping, that I'm all discovering and sharing, but, it's okay, like, even if it's just 1 bed and then that gets mixed into your rotation and, you're going through it that way and you can see the benefit of that from year to year, and then eventually, all of your beds have been cover cropped, and so I would, like, say, don't feel intimidated by, like, "I really wanted to leave my tomatoes a couple more weeks," and then it makes it too late. Well, it's okay. Just take out 1 tomato, 1 area of something, and maybe do a little less sacrificing that way. That would be that's my first thing, is what I'm telling myself as I need to go do that today, so
Right, right, that's what I'm thinking as well.
It's
just
really
like
more of a pep talk for Alexis.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm pep talking myself, so that I think
Mm.
is one way, and you could also just cover your beds with something. We say, like, don't leave them bare.
Yep.
Like, ideally, in a perfect world, you would have living roots in that system, but y if you can't do that, cover it with a tarp. We've talked about this before, like, it's
Solarize
because
it.
then you're not, um as long as you're not getting a lot of, rain and winter winds, uh, washing away that organic matter that you do have there, that topsoil, that organic matter that is currently there, cover it with a tarp, cover it with something to keep it from there. That's the next best solution if you can't do, living roots. What that does is it'll warm the soil up for you, and that can open a window for you to do an early spring/late winter cover crop, which will be before your summer stuff will go in. So, like, there's one that I've tried and I'm excited to, like, really amp up this year, called Lacey Facilia, which is a late winter, very early spring. Like, for us in Kentucky, we're talking like March. Well, I'm not going to put, if I was growing tomatoes, I'm not going to put those tomatoes in until May. So I've got a really nice window where I can be getting some good living roots into the soil early. I'm keeping my weeds down, all that stuff we talk about, but it's building organic matter. And then I'm just going to terminate it and throw in my summer annuals. And so, uh, don't feel bad if you've missed the window. Again, I'm pep talking myself. Don't feel bad. It's okay.
Yeah, and I'm gonna go home and be like, "Hey, we need to get on this, right? Let's
Yeah.
do it."
Yeah. Or having a bed that you can throw in some buckwheat for 30 days, just like even just a month. I'm always surprised at how good something can get. And that's in the summer. So, like, in between your gardens, or, oh man, I didn't get that one bed planted soon enough. My tomatoes aren't going to be ready for another month. I'm going to throw in some buckwheat. Again, just kind of having consistent living roots in there, I think would be like my number one recommendation for building organic matter in an inexpensive way. It's a little bit more to wrap your brain around, but once you get it, you got it.
I
Anybody
think
else?
It's good stuff.
well, I think, some what I've been hearing for the last 10 minutes or so is like is the
Too
idea
much
that
Alexis.
no, is that, to harken back a little bit to what I was saying about the almost the worldview shift
Mhm,
that is required to think about building organic matter versus thinking of the soil as this place that we're going to get stuff out of, or
mhm,
extract stuff from, is that there is no organic matter import model that we can take product A, dump it on, and instantly, or even within 6 weeks, our organic matter is better. It's this incremental, strategic, systems thinking process where you are doing 10 small things. It's like health, like taking care of your health. You know, it's like, oh, I would love to take a pill and all my health problems. That's not really how it works, right? It's,
dang it.
you take the
Healthy
stairs here, maybe,
eating
or
and
you eat this, or you eat that, or you
Time and
meditate, take a
small
nap,
things,
do whatever you need to do. Like all the things. You can't just do one particular thing. I think for me, one of the things that you talked about earlier, Alexis, is that or we all did, was the idea of tillage. And I think reducing your tillage or thinking strategically about how much tilling you're doing is another way to preserve. So some of it's building organic matter, some of it is reducing the amount of how much you're burning off. But I completely agree with what you said, that like we love to act like the world is black and white, and there it's either till baby till, or this land hasn't been touched in 50 years. But like ultimately we are in horticulture, we're in agriculture. Agriculture implies humans acting on the earth. So there's going to be some impact. And so it's more about thinking how to do it in a smart way, in a thoughtful way. So that might be, I'm only going to till once per year. Or I'm not going to do 3 passes until it's a fine powder that could,
right.
could pass through the sieve easily.
Which, and like even broad forking, people so people think of broad forking as no-till, but like the whole idea of tillage is disturbance of the soil. So technically broad forking, and no knock against it, I think it's awesome, but broad forking is a form of tillage. So like, let's not
So if you're not familiar with broad forking, it's this big heavy fork
Yes.
thing you use, and you push it down into the soil. It looks almost like a big wide pitchfork.
Yeah,
But it's
multiple
heavy,
times.
and you push it down into the soil, and it creates these channels where, like you were talking about, that air can exchange, some
Water
of the
can
organic
move,
matter can mix, the water porosity, et cetera, et cetera. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't invert the soil, and it doesn't break up the soil into the soil structure in the same way that like a rototiller does. So there's maybe tillage is like like we could do a whole episode on tillage that could be kind of a like different implements,
kinds,
different
yeah.
approach. But I think in general, like when Jessica was talking about all the stuff, different things that she did to build that soil in her backyard, I was just like, yeah, I mean, it's like a strategy game or something almost, where you're like, I know I can do this, but, and then to Alexis's comments about the consistency across time, you just have to, think and be able to adapt and be willing to do some of the small things here and there. And some of them are so boring, and there is no substitute for time. Those are my thoughts
And I
on
think
it.
if you want to motivate yourself, do approach your local extension office, establish a baseline of how much organic matter, not only a baseline, but establish a scale of what's good, what's ideal, what is not ideal in your soil, but establish a baseline through testing, wait a couple of years after you've made some effort uh, and on increasing that soil organic matter, and then take another test and see where you are. And I've seen home gardeners and even commercial operations, they respond tremendously to verifying their success. They see that what they're doing is working. So what do? They go and do more of that good thing that is
Yeah.
working. So it's sort of a reinforcement loop. Do that. The testing is there, and you can see if what you are doing is effective, and hopefully that will establish good, routines and habits in whatever you're doing. So yeah, definitely go and have that test done, and kind of work, with your local offices and getting that done.
Cool. Well, the corgis would like to tell me to stop podcasting.
Full bark. Full stop.
Yeah. Sorry about
Yeah.
that. I'm enjoying the
They're the
beautiful fall
co-host,
weather,
Alexis. It's
and they're
fine. They are the
want to
co-host.
co-host. They're real cute, but their voices are not. They're video friendly.
Voice for TV.
Yeah, they've got. So, anyways, before you all have to listen to them anymore, thank you all for being with us today. Follow us on Instagram at Horticulture Podcast. You can shoot us an email that is in here. The mailman must be here. That's the only thing I have to say. You can shoot us an email that is in the show notes. And Thanks for being here with us today. We hope that as we grow this podcast, you will grow with us.